I turned off that notification, and here is this week's Jim Miller's garden. It was been really hot last week. I've had to water uh, everything that was still alive in the garden quite often, twice every other day. I've been watering. Today it's supposed to rain. I hope I can skip watering. Here I got a couple watermelons growing good. I don't really like the shape of them, but they're getting bigger every day. And I discovered this one that's crawled through the fence. It looks good. Here's a squash that came up on its own. I left it. I'm gonna have to divert it away from the watermelons when it starts crawling more. I put a link on Facebook. I don't know if it'll be uh, viewable live or not, but that's what I did. Here are the butternut squash. Uh, these need to be cut and taken inside and to be used. So I'll do that pretty soon. And here is my volunteer squash planting. I brought them down here from the upper garden, and they're crawling all over. This one, and this squash here is getting pretty big. That one crawling out there hasn't bloomed yet. This hot weather really takes a lot of the ambition of them of putting on fruit. And there's tomatoes in this planting here. And where is that one? And there's a little tomato on that one, and there's others. So, and here are the pineapple tomatoes. There's some getting ripe. I'm going to take them in for Nana. And I'll try to keep them separate. She wants to see how they taste. So I'll try to I'll pick them and then put them in a paper bag and take them to the kitchen counter to ripen. Okay, here are the sweet potatoes. They're looking really good. They're starting to crawl all over. They're light green on the ends. That means that they're really growing fast. They like this weather, hot weather. I've been watering them also because, it's been super hot and dry. Here's some volunteer squash I brought down and put around this swing. And they're starting to move a little since I've watered them. They're starting to grow a little bit. Maybe by September they might have something on them. And here is a large, ugly squash that's in this. I brought these tomatoes down, the volunteer tomatoes down, and put them here. And they're the worst looking of the group that I brought down and put in rows. But they're looking pretty good if the rabbits stay out of them. Okay, here is a Big Zack tomato. They're big and they'll probably be ripening here in the next couple weeks. And here's some more of those volunteer tomatoes I bring down. This little group is looking really good. They're the last ones I brought down. And they're looking real. And this is another group of volunteer tomatoes. They're just really, really getting tall. They're putting a lot of tomatoes on. I've harvested a good number of tomatoes off of them already. And this is really encouraging that they're growing despite the heat. And there's more of them. Here's some volunteer pumpkins and squash right here. Uh, I planted, where was that corn row at? They washed down, oh, I know where they came from. There was a corn row up there, and I put manure, chicken manure that had pumpkin seeds in, and they washed down and they germinated down in here. So I'll have to keep them watered if it doesn't rain, if they're going to make anything. Okay, here is a giant Marconi pepper, and there's large peppers at the bottom, and these others are looking good. This one I had to prop up because the peppers were leaning it over last night. Here's another one, and that one down there, I got 2 peppers off of it. I put one of them in some stew the other day. Okay, here is where my second corn was, and there's squash down in it, and they're starting to grow now since they're getting more light, since the corn is gone. I've been watering it to kind of keep them alive. We just need some rain. Okay, here is, that's a good bean. I got to pick, there's like one bean there to pick. There's two or three beans to pick off of this climbing bean. I got it trained up the fence. This is a volunteer bean from, I planted a row up here in the upper garden last year, and a bean plant on the end crawled up the fence, and it went up and down the fence, and I was getting bucketfuls of beans all through last fall. So this is the one of the seedlings that came up from that, and I'm going to try to replicate getting beans that are climbing on the fence. So we'll see how it works. Here are my these are beefsteak tomatoes. I've been really picking a lot of them, and you can see that there is ones that need to be picked today. I've been picking every other day, and I've been getting half a 5-gallon pail off every other day off all my tomatoes. And some of these are pretty much picked through. And I don't know if these tops are going to do much. We got severe heat and dry lately, and tomatoes don't like that. They like warm weather, but they don't like super hot day after day. And they're blooming, but they're not putting on tomatoes yet. Again, if it's going to continue to be hot, there ain't going to be much for tomatoes the rest of the year, at least on these. Here's another volunteer squash. These look like mainly squash plants, and I brought them down, put a hill in. There was tomatoes in with it, and this plant here is got a few little tomatoes. I need to take a stick and tie it up so it can get up in the air. So that looks pretty good. And here is a group of tomatoes in my cage here. They were looking good. There's actually pretty decent sized ones on this side here, and those are doing good. And here's another caged tomato. These small ones down here are finally getting some size to them. There was some, I think that was the mildew mold issues, and hot and dry weather kind of put the end to that. Plus I was spraying a solution on them, And this one here's got a few tomatoes. Another hill of squash. And this one had, I think I harvested one of them or took it in the house. Here's one here. And I've been watering it, and it's this area should be pretty much all squash leaves. That hot weather has really dampened them down a lot. Let's go over here. Okay, here is what was my lettuce. I was trying to get some seed, but the groundhog climbed the fence several times, and it ate most of it. And I'm mad at him. I put some dirty underwear, some rotten underwear and stuff up here on the fence, and he seems to be staying over in the other yard so far. So maybe in a few days I'll be more confident that he's not going to come back. And here are cabbages, and I got wire around them to keep the groundhog from eating them. I think there's only 3. I think there's just 4 of them left. And they could be cut anytime, but we got so many in the house, in the fridge. These can grow a little more. But that's it with them. And here is where my yellow onions were. I harvested them yesterday. And I'm gonna go up here and take a chance and put corn in, like my 5th planting of corn. And that's a potato patch, or was a potato patch. And I'll put corn in, and hopefully the groundhog stays out of it. So I'm gonna give that a shot. Might even do it tomorrow. It's gonna be cooler. And here are these turkey craw beans. The heat really destroyed the leaves, foliage on it. And I started watering the row again, and there's blossoms coming back. And they probably will, a lot of it's the weather. If it keeps hot, they're not gonna do much, even though I water them, because they just don't like heat. I'm totally out of water. Roof water is gone. It's all gone. Need some rain and fill these pails again. Maybe we'll get a little today. Okay. Cantaloupe. I got a decent sized one there. And there's a couple little ones. Where's that other one? Okay. Got 2 there. I got 1 over there. There's probably others that are doing good. The plants themselves, the vines, they look really healthy. Been watering them quite a bit. So maybe some cantaloupe here within a month. And here is these. That one's. This one, it's still deciding if it wants to be a cabbage. It's got some firmness in, little firmness to it. The heat's kind of hard on them too. And here are some of my lettuce. This was volunteer lettuce I brought up, and it's blooming. Hopefully the groundhog doesn't sneak over here and get it. And I might get enough seed to plant some next spring. And volunteer tomato, that was pretty well loaded, and they're decent size, so that was good. And more volunteer tomatoes. And here is what's left of the acorn squash. It got hot and dry, and about destroyed them. So these here, these squash here, I need to cut them like even today and get them in the house. Since I've been watering these squash, the ends of them have been perking up. Oh, that one's blooming now. That one's blooming. It's got a fruit on it and it's blooming. I need to bring over another flower and pollinate it. Any kind of squash flower will do. And so if it's dry, I'll keep watering them and they'll put more squash on later. And here I cut out this, that was a flat Dutch. It was a tiny cabbage. This plant was from last year, and I cut some vines. I cut some of the, what was I doing? I think I don't know. For some reason, I cut some of the foliage off, and it did grow a cabbage, and I took it inside, so got a little cabbage for later. Most of this is oh, there's that potato. Most of this here is nightshade berries, and they came up volunteer. Here is a potato. Where's your? I need to dig when that. Got to remember where that is, that stem, and dig up that dirt here after this vine dies, and then maybe there's a tiny potato under there. Okay, here is what's left of the this is the purple Cherokee tomato that's got a couple left. That one's a lie, and most of it died, most of the plant, and who knows what happened. Disease, I don't know. So it had good tomatoes on it, and I got them inside. They were pretty large. Here is looking pretty good. Well, I need to tie that one up. These are Bush Goliaths. They're not very big. They're not overly big tomatoes on it. But there's plenty, and the foliage looks good, so it may put on later. And here, this is another Big Zack tomato. I need to somehow get a tree limb in there and brace it, because it's getting all over. And this is the Brandywine, I think. Yeah, this is a Brandywine tomato that's got some sunburn on it. It's been that hot, and they're not really ripe enough to pick, so I'm kind of, look, this one's really burnt on this. I think that's a Mr. Stripey. Mr. Stripey's burning up. And here's a good tomato on the tops. Okay. And another Brandywine. Most of them been picked. And a Mr. Stripey, those tomatoes look pretty good. It's got all kinds of foliage in the top. Okay. Volunteer tomatoes, volunteer squash. Here is one of the neighbors. They grew some very pretty marigolds last year, and this is one of them. A seed washed on down, and it's growing here. And here is the tomato that was in the carrot row, and it's a volunteer, and it's a volunteer that's putting on very nice normal tomatoes, so I'm very pleased with it. And another little marigold from the neighbors. Nightshade plant, more little squash. And here's a sunflower. Okay, the birds haven't been messing with it. I need to cut that off. It's ripe. And here's the last ear of my first corn. It had some, I think the rabbit ate it off twice. And it finally put an ear on, and I brought pollen over. And it's probably a couple, 3 days off. Another marigold. And here's the giant sunflowers. Probably between 10 and 11 feet high. I need to get a tape measure. And some of the heads were just very misshapen, and they're not putting much seed on. And I have no idea why that happened. Sunflowers can take a lot of drought. This one here that's horrible looking. Maybe a few seeds, but it's terrible. Okay. Here's my fourth planting of corn. That's got a lot of volunteer stuff in it. There's a tomato, and here's a watermelon crawling out, a nightshade berry plant. And the nightshade it's taken over this corn hill. This corn and a volunteer tomato and a volunteer cantaloupe that's looking real good, and the rest of the corn. And I decided this was a sweet onion row, and I harvested them, and there was volunteer plants in the row, and I said, well, I'm going to leave them and put corn in between. And so far, they're doing good together. In this area, if this cantaloupe grows, it'll spread out and take this area up and make it look nice and green, and that watermelon will do the same. Tomatoes will get big, and the corn will get tall, and it'll look like that space got taken up again. Okay, and I'm gonna have some breakfast. Now, where were those? Oh, there's two there. Nightshade berries. They're really tasty this year. Very yummy. And I got a thumbs up. Thanks for the thumbs up. Those are good. I just stay here and eat. That is yummy. I'm glad I left them. Those are yummy. Okay, here is a couple avocado plants. This first one here, I thought it was a tree that was in a compost pile, and I pulled on it and it popped, and it was an avocado. I broke the root off, so it might make it, it might not. And then this one was next to it, and I took a shovel and dug the entire plant out, and I put in a pot here with chicken compost, so in regular garden dirt, and watered it real good. They still look, and I just did this probably an hour ago, and so far they look okay. We do have an avocado plant that we planted like 5 years ago, and in the winter I take it in, and then I bring it out in the summer, and it grows, and it's not very tall. It's just more of, hey, we got an avocado, and here we got more. if they survive. Okay, here are my row of volunteer tomatoes that I put in pots. And this one's got tomato, got a few tomatoes. And they're all blooming, and they're kind of struggling to put more or put tomatoes on. Some of these are working, some of them are not. They're definitely just gotta. I water them every day. I gotta water them every day, and just suck all that moisture out of that ground. Hey, black kitty. Black kitty. Okay. I forgot to do. This here is. Oh, I should pollinate that. If I got pollen on it. That's got a nice silks on it. I don't know if there's pollen in that. I got to get on the. Yeah, that looks good too. That one's got. Well, these here. This group of corn here. I noticed early on the leaves were not the right color. They were very pale. And thought, well, I've seen that before, where I had a problem with nutrition, most likely, and spaying up the ground. I just put corn in. I would just put in corn that wasn't, the ground wasn't spayed up, and I would put it in hills. I would plant 4 seeds to get 3 viable plants, and most of the time this year I've been getting 4 in each hill. So here I did that again on this 3rd corn planting, and this area up in here didn't do so well because probably a nutrition issue of some sort. There's squash over here that may have sent roots over and took some of the best nutrients out. And but now some of these later ones are they're putting out some good silks. So I'm going to have to find some pollen somewhere and pollinate them good, and they will put an ear on if I find some pollen. And these down here are fine. These are, we've got 7-foot corn, 7 to 8 foot corn, and they're looking great. Maybe 2 ears on some of these stalks. See, this one's like, this ear here is about shoulder high. These are looking good. And I'm looking for I think one of these has got pollen on it, and this one has got a bee on it. It might have pollen. So I'm going to try to get some pollen up to these late arrivals and get that ear started. So a lot of mixed results on this corn row. You can see that this shorter and paler on this corn up here, and down there it looks very good. Okay, that first bush Goliath tomato that I planted that we got from the nursery, that was a foot high, and this is like the 3rd group of tomatoes that are growing on it. So it's doing really good. I got a bucket tomato that's the leaves have died for something, I don't know why, but it sprouted out a sprig here, and it may put some more on later. Here's the toilet tank with squash that had better days. This one looks Well, this one looks like it wants to do something. It might say it's going to rain. And pineapples, I even water them every day if they need it or not. And here is the squash. It's put on I think that's more of a pumpkin. It just started growing one here this week. A lot of my squash have just died, flat out died. And it would look good one day, and then the next day it would be gone. Even if I watered a hill, there would be squash that just suddenly die. And probably the heat. And there's lots of tomatoes down in this middle of this hill. And there's a starting to ripen Bush Goliath tomato. I'll pick that tonight. And here I got squash on this backside of the corn. And there's that lower one there is not putting on yet, but this one here's got a big squash. And there's a big squash here. I've been harvesting several of them for jack-o'-lanterns. And here's some more planters with, this one's got a cantaloupe, watermelon, and a squash in it. And you know, they're not doing that great, but they're kind of alive. And here is a one with a cantaloupe and a watermelon, but the watermelon it's got a little fruit on it. So it's not nearly ripe, and it's probably not going to get very big, but I'll have a tiny little palm in the hand watermelon to eat later. And here is my largest volunteer tomato in cage. I have harvested a lot of tomatoes off of it. And here's some riper ones here that I'll pick. And here's another hill of squash and a little tomato. And here's a funny looking little, probably partly zucchini. And here's a little squash. They're not doing good like I expected them. It's just the heat and dry. They may take off here, especially if it rains. Oh boy. Okay. And this is another hill. I can't tell this stuff apart anymore. Is there any squash that survived that? They're probably over in there somewhere. But here is what they call a, oh damn, what is that again? It's a tomato, or a husk tomato. It's got this husk here, but I can feel that there's a fruit inside the husk. So that's a husk, and this came from elsewhere. The seed it probably came with with birds. They would poop out a seed in their poop, and there we go. We got a bush, not a bush, a husk tomato. It's got several on it that are getting big. The plant looks good. I'm probably going to try to save seed on that if this is a real good thing to eat. Another volunteer tomato. That's good. That's going to have a fruit on it. Will you please let go? I'm getting that squash out of it. The squash will take over that tomato if I let it. And whoops. Okay. And that's got a blossom with a fruit on it. So I think about 3 days that one will have a flower and have a squash. That's good because lately that hasn't been happening. Okay, here is one of these squashes that the plant died just out of the blue, and it had a fruit on it, and now the fruit is turning. That'll probably be chicken food. It'll get soft and start to rot here pretty soon, and the chickens will love it. Neighbors' chickens. Here's another nice looking squash. That'll turn yellow. That looks like the ones we had last year. That's fully grown, and those had a very thick shell on it and hard to carve. And I would throw them in the air, the extra ones, and they would hit the cement and they would bust right in half, and then I give to the chickens. I did a whole bunch of that. So that's what that is. And here is a volunteer tomato that the seed was placed here naturally by I don't know what, because it wasn't in the, it's not in the row. It's not in the row of these squash that I planted along the fence. And let's look at this one. I don't see any fruit on that one's flower, or fruit flower, or whatever. Well, that thing, I need to cut that acorn squash. It's kind of hidden. It's kind of hidden under the vines, but I need to cut. I think the plant gave up and died. Okay, here's a nice. Why is it? Here's a nice little squash. Those are going to be a challenge for jack-o'-lanterns if I need to use that one. Okay, those are. Since I've been watering these, they're starting to liven up a little. And here we're back to the starting point on the opposite side of the fence, and in Jim Miller's garden. And there you go. Oh, I didn't look at these. Real quick, I'll look at these tomato plants. Oop, that was hard getting around. Oh, there's some to eat. There's some ooh, that one looks yummy. More nightshades. Oh, these are tasty. Man. Those are good. Here's a squash. Did that vine die? Well, it's pretty sick. Oh, that's a weed. Here's a squash. Like really a flat looking one. That needs to be cut out of there real soon. The plant's dying. And here's oh, I need to turn this around. Ooh, where is that? All tangled up. I need to. There we go. You go over here, and you go back over there. And you can make a oh, that's another watermelon. Watermelon, another little, that's the one I shown earlier, but I'm going to take its vine and stick back through the fence. It can go back in the patch. Okay. I came over here for the tomatoes and I got in a mess. Volunteer tomatoes that I brought over and put in cages. There's 3 of them, and I've been harvesting off of them. There's a ripe one down there, and this is in the asparagus. These berries, asparagus berries, I don't see them really getting ripe. And I want to harvest some of the seed and plant, kind of fill in this whole area along the back of the shed with asparagus, because it does well here. Eventually I'm going to get that seed. I probably can pick it now and dry it and hold it and then plant the berries. Hey, that's something to Google, when to plant asparagus seed. I did it, actually some of these plants, maybe it's this one. This one, this plant here was likely from seed. This was over at the neighbor's, and I transplanted the asparagus over here, and I think there's 5 plants of them that are still alive. But this one, I think over there, there was some berries, and I took the berries and I just dug a little trench and buried them and watered them. And of course it rains a lot, and voila, it worked. So this is probably a proven thing where I can take the berries and I can fill in over here, and I might even, I don't know, I'll have to look that up. Do it this fall or do it next spring and put the asparagus in and have a bigger area of asparagus. So that's the end of this. Okay, there's 2 there. Well, that one's pretty new. That's a newbie. And here is I hope there's no worms on you. I've been spraying these for, what are they? Squash burrowing worms. And because I've lost a few, I think they're mostly volunteer acorn squash to them. They would burrow into the fruit and they would die, or they would rot. And these, I got to keep spraying this stuff for that. And that's usually something that's not around this early in the summer, but this year it was. So this is the end of this week's Jim Miller's Garden, and I hope next week at this time we've had hopefully an inch or so of rain, and so I won't have to water every day and just keep things barely alive. All right, well, thanks for watching, and maybe next Sunday. I've been doing this on Sundays to show people my garden and maybe teach a little bit. A big garden, it takes 45 minutes to go through and just check things out. All right, well, thanks for watching. Until next week, hopefully things will be a little wetter. Thanks for watching.